let's dive into a demo. So let me start with Extended ECM, right? We talked about automatically creating teams based on business rules. So when I create a new business workspace, and let's create a customer, and let's see, I'm going to call it customer A just for the demo. I'm going to save this. And what it does in the background, it knows that for a customer, I want to have a team. So it's creating the workspace. And in the background, it's creating the team for me. So hopefully in a second, you'll see a pop-up from Teams that notifies Nick that he was added to a new team. So let me go to the workspace. In this case, you see the workspace, Nick, because I'm Nick, I created the workspace, I'm the owner. If you go to roles, you can see that the role here, sales representative, has team lead behind it. So the team lead role, which is the primary role of the workspace, we are using that to make this user an owner in Teams. If you have multiple people assigned to that role, you will also have multiple owners in the team. Secondly, we have the metadata, which is pretty empty because it didn't add anything, but it means that everything that goes into the workspace inherits this metadata. We have documents, and I'll come back to that. And we have the Office 365 information. So what we show here is the connection to the team, the calendar, and any conversation. So the conversations in the group is actually the email. So we show you an example of the email. If there are any calendar items, we show the calendar items as well. And if you want to open up the native application, like Outlook or the calendar or notebook, you can click on the links and it will open up those locations. A second thing that we do is we talked about the bidirectional sync. So the bidirectional sync is set up by creating mappings in the workspace template. So we've set up 4 folders to be synchronized with the team, and you can see that they will get this sharing icon. So this is the same icon as for Core Share, but in this case, when you hover on it, you can see that the item is shared with Microsoft Teams. So in the background, anything that is stored in any of these 4 folders is synchronized to Teams. So let's take a look at the team that was created. So here we have customer A, and there's the notification with a little delay. And when I show all the channels, you can see that I now have 4 different channels. So I have one with external sharing, one for meetings, one is private, and one is shared. And I've set up 2 channels with a sync icon. And this is functionality that's going to be released in 23.02. So it will allow you to visually show users that you have channels that are synchronized with a workspace. Just for maybe legal purposes, that people know that when they store something in here, it will be synchronized into the backend system. All right, so let's have a look at a team that already has some content. So I have the global trade team here, and global trade has different users. So we have Nick, Bob, and Diane, who are the owner, and we have Deek, who is a guest. So private channels work in a way that a private channel has a subset of these team members. So when I go in here, then you can see that only Nick and Diane have access to this channel. So whatever is synchronized or added into the private channel here will be synchronized into the private folder in the workspace. So from here, only Nick and Diane will have access in the workspace. Also, only Nick and Diane will have access. If we have a shared channel is a new functionality in a team. A shared channel can have completely different user model than the team that it's part of. So if you see here, we can share a channel with people, a team, or with teams that I own. And also you can share it with external users. So let's say we have an external address, then you can invite this user to the team. This is really useful if you have a lot of external parties. So maybe you have an external legal team, you have an external designer team, and then you can give those external users only access to the channel that they need to access. So this allows you to add users to the channel without actually having to add them to the actual team. So when we look at the team and we just added all the mappings, it's going to synchronize anything I add to external sharing, for instance, into the workspace. So let me drop a file in there. So now uploaded the file into that channel, which means that in the workspace, it should be in external sharing as well. So let me open it up. You can see that the icon is now yellow, so it sees a change. And when I do a refresh, it has the item synchronized. That also works the other way around, of course, because it's a bidirectional sync. So if I add a file in the workspace, you can see it sees change. When I go to Teams and I change the view quickly, you can now see that the Word document arrived in the team. So we do not only synchronize the creation of these files, but also, for instance, the deletion, and what is even more important, statuses. So when I go to this file and I reserve the file, so that means that maybe I want to edit the file, or it's in a certain status where I don't want anyone to edit the file. So now in Extended ECM, no one is able to edit the file because it's reserved. If I go to Teams, and again, I do a free refresh, you can now see that the file is reserved. So the SharePoint app, that's the name of the integration, checked out the document. So now on this side, no one is able to edit the file. From SharePoint, we have the same. We can check it out. So now it's checked out. If I go to Content Server or Extended ECM, actually, then you can see the file is now locked. So you can see different statuses because this file is locked by the content sharing service, and this one is reserved by Nick Wheeler. So it has a different icon in there. Let me unlock the files. So I'm going to unreserve this, and in SharePoint, I'm going to check this back in. Okay. So now both files should be unlocked. The other thing that we discussed is, permissions, right? So maybe we have a certain legal hold or something like that. So in this case, the assignment of contract. Let's go to the properties. And I'm going to fake a legal hold. So this is going to be company confidential for the time being. So when I now go to Teams and I go to files after refresh, you can now see the file is gone because we set up a rule that says if the file has a certain security clearance level or higher, stop sharing the content to CoreShare or Microsoft Teams. If we lower it again, like maybe unrestricted, the system knows, okay, it can be shared again. And if I do a refresh, the file is now back for sharing. So this is a really important feature because this really makes sure that when something has a certain permission or status in the system, it will not be available from Microsoft Teams. If we create folders, the same folders are created and all of these things. If we go to the metadata, all these files will inherit the metadata directly from the workspace. In this case, I didn't set up anything, but let's say this one has a classification. So if I go to my folder and I'm going to set a classification on this, I'm going to choose a classification and records management classification in this case. So we're working in sales, and let's set customer. All right, so when I want to apply it to sub-items, and I'm going to go back to my folder contents. So you can see now everything is classified. And just to prove my point, I'm going to add a new file, design review. It's going to be synced into the system. And when I do a refresh, you can see that the file is now, the change is noticed. And the file is now added and inherited the classification. So the user is just working from Teams, creating folders, creating files, and in the backend, we're making sure that the file gets the right permissions, gets the right metadata and classification to make sure that it's safe. So you saw that we can create a team based on a business rule. Of course, you can also do it from Teams. So when you go to the OpenText Extended ECM app, you can see that we now have the ability to create a new workspace. And let's log in. And now you can see that we have access to the workspace templates. So we worked with customers, so let's create customer. So from here, I can create the workspace. And what it technically will do, it will create the team, it will create the workspace, it will use the workspace template with all of the business rules to create the workspace and set up the connections. And it will give me the links to both of them. So when I save this, it's now creating the workspace, it's creating the team, and it's connecting them together. So there it's created. We could go to the team and we could go to the business workspace or create another one. So let's have a look at the team. So here we have customer B, and you can see that the channels with the sharing has been set up along with the icon. And now we can work from Teams and everything will be automatically stored again. Okay, so we now saw the automatic setup, but we can also archive the team. So archiving team means that anything from that team is stored into Extended ECM. So when we go to the workspace in Office 365, if you are the workspace owner, you can retire the team. So in this case, global trade, maybe we use this team for an escalation, and the escalation is done, so we can now retire the team. When we retire the team, anything from that team will be archived. And I mean everything like files, recordings, wikis, notes, and chats, which is really important as well. So this team has archiving already set up. So we can do the archiving of the team while the team is still live, or we can set up archiving when we hit that button that says retire the team. In this case, I already have it set up. So what the system does is that it creates an archiving folder in the workspace. In this case, it's called Team Archive, but you can set the name yourself. You can see that in the template, we already set up a classification for this. So anything that's archived will already have a classification rule on it. And then we archive the content based on the type. So the wiki is an HTML file. And for each channel that has a wiki, we store that in the channel folder. So in this case, we only have a wiki in the general folder. So you can see here that there's only a folder called general, and inside there's the HTML file. If we go up to notes, then when we open up notes, again, we have the notebook attached to the team, and the note files are stored in a native note format. So if you open this up, it will open up Microsoft OneNote and open up the file. The other thing that we have is files. So files is anything like chats, recordings, files. So if I open this up, again, it will have a folder for each of the channels. And you can see that I had some channels before that were archived, but they're not there anymore. But for instance, in general, I have my chats, I have my files. which are all archived here. If I would have a recording, it would be in here as well. Let's have a look at the chat. So when we archive chats, it could be that we archive the chat in one big file, or we could split them up based on archiving schedules or changes. So let's have a look. This is an HTML file. If I open up the viewer, you can see that the whole chat is archived, including links to files, links to items, icons are shown, images are shown, and everything is there. The reason why we have multiple backups for chat, and that is the reason for that is governance. In Microsoft Teams, you can delete your own chats. So let's say someone looks at a file in the chat, says, I checked this file, it's okay, you can send it to the customer. And then something goes wrong or you made a mistake and he's deleting his kind of approval from the chat. So now in our archive, we're missing this crucial piece of audit history. So in this case, when we archive these files, when there's a change, or the chats, when there's a new chat, we have the full audit trail of what happened in that team. So you can always look back if it's something happening. If you actually retire the team, we will make the team read-only in the system. And to see those, you need to go to Options, and then here you can see Archived Files. So the archived teams are read-only. So when we are in the system, it will, and let me make my screen bigger. So now you can see this team was archived. You can't make any changes. You can still open up the files, but they are not editable. You can see the documents, you can see the recordings, you can see whatever is in there, but it's archived. One of the problems also that customers encounter is that Microsoft does not clean up these archived teams. So that could mean that if you have a lot of these teams created, you will have hundreds, maybe thousands of archived teams that will be in there forever, consuming storage, cluttering up the system. But also, if you have a lot of teams, you will run into the limitations of Microsoft Teams, which could be something like 2,000 teams. So to make sure that this is cleaned up, the organization should have something in place to retire all these archived teams. In the next version of our solution, we'll be able to give you the option that when a team is archived, that we actually delete it on the team side. Because you don't want to run into a situation where we have archived the team's content, we have a nice records management schedule, there's a disposition, and then we think the content is removed because of the disposition rules and an approval, and it's removed from the system. But now there's still an archive team in there with all the files, all the chats, and all the recordings. Right? So this is not something that we want. So in the next version, you'll be able to clean this up directly after retiring the team. All right, let's go back to our presentation. So as a summary, we have full Teams lifecycle support. So if we look at Teams, and let's start with the Extended ECM, so we can tie Teams into the business automation. When an object is created, we can set up a rule to automatically create a team. We can manage the content that comes from the bidirectional sync, and we can apply records management to any content that comes from Teams, including all the archives, wikis, notes, chats, recordings, and everything that's in there. When we automatically create a team, we set up the synchronization, we set up the team, and during that life cycle, we can expose business content, we can synchronize users to the team coming from the workspace, and we can archive the content. During the collaboration phase, we synchronize the shared content, we synchronize updates, statuses, read-only statuses. We can sync the mappings. So if you have any new mappings, we can synchronize these new mappings, and we can manage the content based on the security clearance. Also, we can automatically apply sensitivity labels based on the security clearance level, which means that if you download a file from Teams, it will have the Microsoft Information Protection sensitivity labels applied, which makes sure that when something leaves Teams, it has the organization rules applied to it. And then when we archive the team, when we retire the team and the content. The team is made read-only. The final archive is done. And in the next version, you'll be able to delete the team as well. And then the records management in Extend takes over the lifecycle of that content. So when we summarize the added value to Microsoft 365 and Teams, it's not just Teams, right? So today we're talking about Teams, but it has a whole suite of solutions that we have there. So we talked about Teams, and you can see all the value that we have there. But also in SharePoint, we can do the same. We can automatically, based on rules, archive SharePoint sites, SharePoint lists, documents from SharePoint. You can use SharePoint as your primary interface by embedding the business content in the SharePoint sites and pages by using our web parts. And you can also manually archive content from SharePoint. But also working from the business workspace, you can pick files from Teams, OneDrive, or your email to archive them to the workspace. OneDrive as well. So OneDrive typically is used for collaboration, but you might want to create a backup of the OneDrive files in case someone accidentally deletes the files. If they accidentally, or well, not accidentally, but if they leave the organization and if they do not store the OneDrive content in the workspace, then we can also archive the OneDrive boxes and automatically classify everything for governance purposes. If you look at Office Online integration, you can co-author files directly from the workspace, from Teams, and everything is automatically archived. All the versions are automatically updated. We can apply information protection labels and security by applying the sensitivity labels based on the business rules, based on the security clearance and supplemental markings. And we can log files based on these legal holds by using security clearance. And then, of course, we extend teams in our business processes. So we can embed these teams and SharePoint content within the business applications. So let's say you have a connection to Salesforce and you have a connection to a team. Then from Salesforce, using the widget, you can see all the team's content flowing in. If you work on the files, any change will automatically flow into the team as well, and all the changes will flow back. And you can use the business rules to automatically create and archive the teams. And then, also from working from Teams or SharePoint, you can see all the Salesforce content and metadata from the tabs in Teams as well. So you can work from Teams on your Salesforce content.